Hey guys, so today what are we going to do? We're going to talk plasma cutters. I got two plasma cutters here that I ordered off of Amazon. They're from China. They're Chinese-made inverter plasma cutters. One is 110 volt and the other one is 220 volt. They're both made by the company Hitbox, or at least that's what I think it's made by. They're all very similar. If you go do some search, you'll find a ton of plasma cutters online on eBay and Amazon. They're all very similar, and I bet you they all come from the same factory in Shenzhen, China. Now, why do I have two machines? Well, originally I had ordered this machine here, a 110 volt machine, but I realized that this doesn't meet my needs, so I went with a 230 or 220 volt machine instead, just because you can pull more current safely. And I'll get to a reason why I'm saying safely in a second. Both machines use the P31 torch, this guy here. It comes with a few extra consumables, but they're dirt cheap to buy on Amazon or on eBay. The electrode, the cup, and the nozzle tip. This is not, as you can see, doesn't have like a guide or anything for cutting, so there's no pilot arc and there's no high frequency start. It's a scratch start, so you will go through consumables a little bit quicker with this as opposed to some of those higher end machines. But then again, for the price point of these machines, you can't expect to get those other additional features. And I should mention how much I paid for these. I did buy them myself with my own money. The 110 machine and the 220 machine, they were both basically the same price. They were around 200 Canadian dollars, which is a steal. To get into plasma cutting, now you do need a compressor, of course, so there is that other investment, but if you're looking at these, you probably know that you do need a compressor that can supply up to 70 psi continuously. Now for my American friends, that's like a really great price because that's like well under $200. So you can get into plasma cutting for, under 200 bucks. That's crazy. Whereas 10 years ago, it's still pretty expensive. Now these machines aren't going to work as good as your brand name machines like Hypotherm, Lincoln Electric, Mill, or any of those guys. But this will get the hobbyists like myself in their garage, cutting some steel, being able to sever some metal if you need to, cutting sheet metal, at a very, very low cost, low barrier to entry. Okay, so the reason why I went with the 220 machine as opposed to 110 machine is because the 110 machine, it's not powerful enough. Now, if you were to plug this into your wall, your regular wall socket, you're gonna trip the breaker very easily. If you turn this anywhere near 15 amps, like 14, 15 amps, yep, it'll cut metal just fine, but once you start pushing it past that, like 16, boom, your breaker will trip. So I think this machine actually was either a 220 machine and they rewired it, but they didn't change everything in it to work properly for 110 volts. They shouldn't have built this machine to be able to pull so much amperage out of just 110 volts. It's a safety issue. Because on 110 volts on 14 gauge household wiring, you can only pull 15 amps safely, at least according to the electrical code. You could wire this for a 20 amp plug with 12 gauge wire. That'll give you a few extra amps, but it's still not to the full capacity of this machine, the full capabilities of this machine. Because this machine, when you turn the pot up on this, it can crank all the way up to 45, which is kind of weird because the 220 machine, you can only crank this up to 40 amps, which is kind of, I don't know, it's a little weird. I should mention what the names of these machines are. This is the Hitbox Cut 40, and this is the Hitbox CT4500. They don't really have a name for it, they just call it 110 volts. I got this cheat sheet here, and the official name on Amazon is Hitbox Plasma Cutter 35 amp 110 volt inverter cutting machine. So, I don't know, it's not very descriptive. But anyways, so when I reached out to the company about this machine, asking them while I'm tripping the circuit, what's going on, they said that I needed to run a 30 amp breaker on 110 volts. But that would mean I'd need like 10 gauge wire or 8 gauge wire. But that doesn't really compute because at least in North America, you'd be moving towards 230 volts. Like that's something that just isn't really done here. I don't know. And furthermore, the plug And where's that? This plug, this 110 volt plug that they put onto the end of this machine, it actually says 15 amps. That's what it's rated for at 125 volts. That doesn't seem right. This looks like this plug was retrofitted onto this end. Something suspicious with this. So you're telling me to plug this into a 30 amp breaker, even though this plug is only technically rated for 15 amps? I don't think that's CSA approved. So that's probably not good. Now, my experience with these two machines. The 110 volt machine works great. Up to 15 amps works flawless. Cut sheet metal, 1/8 steel, no problem. You cut it all day long. I didn't trip the breaker. Once I started going above that, I started tripping the breaker. So anything thicker than that, this will not cut. I tried to cut some 1/4 inch plate with it, and it was really bogging down. I could do it, but it was really slow. But if you had to cut a minimal amount, you probably could do it. So for the hobbyist, you could get away with this machine if you knowing those limitations. Just make sure you don't push it past those limitations, because you could be potentially causing a fire hazard. So I do sometimes have a need to cut steel that's thicker than 1/8 or 1/4 inch. Well, mostly 1/4 inch. And that's where the 220 volt machine comes in, because this on a double 20 plug, on a double 20 breaker, will easily carry the current that I need to sever or cut 1/4 inch plate. No problem. And I have tested it, and it cuts no problem, flawlessly. In fact, I did find the cuts on the 220 volt machine were way better than the 110 volt at the same amperage. I don't know why that is. Maybe just that this has a little bit extra oomph. But yeah, the cuts were cleaner. There was less dross, less slag. It just looked a little better. Don't get me wrong, the 110 does work, but I don't think it's that good, and I'm a little suspect on it. Also, I should mention, the manual that came with this machine was terrible. It wasn't actually for this machine because the parts didn't match up with it. So just keep that in mind as well. Like the air regulator picture for it, or the air separator, it was wrong. And didn't tell you how to hook up the hose to connect to the main gauge on the front. Whereas this machine, actually the manual that did come with this machine was originally for this machine, it looks like. Because when I compared the two manuals, they're the same. So, in conclusion, what do I think of these machines? Well, 110, as I mentioned, great if you're just going to use sheet metal, if you don't push it past 15 amps. Or unless you have a 20 amp plug, then fine. Even though the plug on this is only rated for 15 amps. The 220 volt machine, awesome. This thing just, I can't believe for the price point what you're getting in terms of performance. Especially for a hobbyist, to get in to be able to just cut some metal quickly, this is awesome. So as long as you have an air compressor and a place to be able to cut this stuff safely, I highly recommend the 220 volt machine. And this is the Cut 40. I'll put links in the description below, but at the end here I'm going to show you some footage of me just cutting some stuff and showing you what it looks like. So yeah, anyways, that's my quick and dirty review of these two machines. Caveat of this machine, be careful with it, in my very humble opinion. You can read the comments online, and people have different varying degrees of opinion. That some people are saying you're going to burn your house down, other people saying no you won't. I don't know. I would rather err on the side of caution. But this machine here, I give it a thumbs up for sure. For the price point, love it. So let's show you some examples of some cuts that I've done with this. Alright, I'm starting to get the hang of this. You have to keep the nozzle away from the workpiece once you get the arc started. And I'm working with one hand and kind of holding the other piece, but so far it works really good. I can see why these nozzles get consumed too if you tap the steel. I cut into a bucket with some water into it, that way just to keep the sparks down. This works really well. I might make a water table sometime too. Alright, 1/4-inch plate. Not too bad, not too much dross. Slag, nice clean cut. Works well. There you have it. Alright, that's the end of my review. Thanks so much for watching.